I kind of use that to my advantage. And I think more doctors should do that.
What happened?
Well, it's still okay.
Still practicing.
Still registered. The box is still ticked.
Hello and welcome to A Doctor's View, a podcast discussing everyday topics in health, fitness and mental well-being, as well as providing an insight into medical life and its challenges. Please note that all opinions are my own and should not replace the advice given to you by your own doctor. I'm Dr Bolivios. Let's begin. Hello everyone and welcome to A Doctor's View. I'm Dr Bolivios. At the start of this year, I was invited by Dr Haidar Al-Hakim of the Surgical Spirit podcast to take part in a roundtable discussion with Dr Shan Hussain, host of the Enduring Health podcast, and also Dr Suhail Hussain, who is a GP. Together, we discussed a wide range of topics within medicine and the NHS, and it made for a really interesting discussion as well as discussing a number of controversial topics. And we had a really good time recording it, so I hope you enjoy it.
It's me, Dr Haidar Al-Hakim, the third eye doctor, and it's a real pleasure to have not just one, but two podcast hosts. Please introduce yourselves.
I'm Dr Bolivios from A Doctor's View podcast.
I'm Shan from Enduring Health.
And also we have Dr Suhail, who's been on my podcast recently, talking about some really interesting topics. And I thought we'd kind of get the ball rolling. This is something that we talk about a lot. Racism in the NHS. So do we have any experience of racism in the NHS? Shan.
Gosh, we're jumping straight into it, yeah, the hard-hitting stuff. Racism in the NHS, well, do we have any experience of it? I think, we pretty much all have our own stories of experience of racism in the NHS. I think sometimes it's outright and very, very apparent whether it's a patient or a relative or even another colleague openly saying something racist. That, in my experience, is extremely rare. But it's that insidious racism, that sort of hidden racism that we don't really, we can't quite put our finger on, that I think needs to be called out quite urgently. Those situations where you have a senior colleague who is very nice to everyone on your team except you, even though you're doing your job just as well, not better than anybody else, and you're staying out of trouble and you're being a good little boy and following the rules.
Isn't this sort of an individualistic aspect rather than an institutional thing? Because, I've experienced it, but it was an individual that was exhibiting these racist...
So is it subjective?
undertones.
Is it a subjective perception? Is that...
So there's that, definitely a subjective perception. But it tends to be individuals rather than an institution that's championing this.
I don't know. When you've got an organisation like the Royal College of General Practitioners, and evidence shows that British medical graduates who are of black, African or minority ethnics have a failure rate that is 3 times higher than white Caucasian British graduates. That's quite a lot. No, I'm not openly turning around and saying that's definitely racism. But I think questions do need to be asked.
Why do you think that is?
Well, the official line is they're not working as hard as the white people. I don't know. I don't have the answers there, but what I do know is I don't want to be a member or an associate of that organisation.
See, I think the problem is any institution mirrors the thoughts and feelings of the society in general. Now, that's not to say the whole of society in the UK is racist, but those in power and those who wield or move the wheels that turn the society are generally of a certain type. And they put in place rules and regulations which, A, discriminate unfairly against those of ethnic minorities, and B, perceive them to be less qualified, less able. So when they go for a promotion, when they go for a job, there was a GP who used to run a course, which I actually attended, Una Coles, and she gained some notoriety for making these comments, saying that she was talking about foreign medical graduates, not British graduates, but she was saying in the RCGP exam, foreign medical graduates are far more likely to fail. they're far more likely to have to resit 2, 3, 4 times. And this is, she's saying, because they're expected to speak with a certain accent, to have a certain way of interacting with patients that may not be culturally what they're used to. Whereas they're clinically perfectly competent. They're perfectly good doctors. They can ascertain a history. They can examine. They can treat and manage. So I think there is this inherent bias in society, and particularly at the higher echelons of society, that trickles down to institutions, whether that's the health service, the police service, government, local and national.
I don't think this is just limited to race, for example, because there's I've got colleagues and friends who have be Asperger's or similar, and I've noticed they've had similar issues. Perfectly competent doctors, and unfortunately they're not able to get their point across to a certain way, or they come across as in a certain way, and it's not favourable because there's this ideal of what you should be. So I agree that there's going to be some bias in terms of the way someone comes across to some extent, but I'm not sure we can just limit it just to as this is because of race.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. But the race is the most apparent thing when someone with a darker skin tone or an accent that is not a British, and even I think, we see that in the news nowadays it's different, but when we were kids, everyone who read the news had a British London / Queen's speech accent, very proper enunciation, very proper pronouncing of words. So, for example, they'd say class instead of class.
But I didn't like them. I liked Trevor McDonald.
Yeah,
Wasn't he your favourite newsreader?
he was great.
He was.
Brilliant.
He was great.
But he was sort of the exception to the rule, wasn't he? I mean, how many other black...
But why is that? I mean, why was he an exception? Does it depend on popularity? Does it depend on what the people want? So if that's what society wants, who are we to say that that's not right, or that's racist, or
We
that
look for
goes...
people.
It's,
But Hitler
it's
was...
Not, it's
Hitler
not really
was,
the will. It's sort of more about market forces, really.
But
So
that's,
if this is what the public expect of a typical GP, to talk in a particular accent, to look in a particular way.
Well, look, when you say the public, you're talking about, 60 million people in the UK. Maybe more. I've maybe got my numbers wrong. So, you can't possibly say that this is the one thing that they all want. Now, we've got to recognise that, we have to work to a certain standard and meet certain criteria and fulfil expectations of a doctor while still being who we are at a human level and connecting with another person at a human level. And I think if we find that we're not managing to do that, then maybe there's a problem with them, maybe there's a problem with us. But what's important is that person goes somewhere and gets the level of care that they're seeking. So I think coming back to race, I kind of go back to what my dad told me when I was really young. And he took me to one side and he said something I'll never forget. He said that whether I like it or not, I, as a darker skinned, son of an Indian immigrant here, have to work at least twice as hard as the fair-skinned man to get as far as I want to get. And that's just the way it is. So suck it up, cry about it now, deal with it, get on with it, and get yourself back to work.
I mean, your dad worked in the NHS as a intensive care specialist.
He became a consultant in 1974, the year I was born, and did ITU. So he was working 110 hours a week, sometimes insane hours, incredibly unsafe. Pay was ridiculous. Just got his head down and worked.
Ridiculously low, of course.
Yeah, ridiculously low is what I meant. Yeah. And it was so bad that he would take his annual leave and go and work in Germany or Sweden, locuming, where they paid significantly more. So I mean, it was tough.
And did he mention racism to you? Did he?
Yes. Yeah. Yes, he did. But his response was just, don't fight it, don't confront it, don't face it. Just you keep your head down and you just go and be brilliant at what you do.
Yeah. And
that's really been my response, my reaction. There are times I get a little bit sucked into things and a bit reactionary. But ultimately, I think if you're fighting the good fight, then it doesn't really matter. I think the important thing is that we're doing our jobs to the best of our ability, we're making a positive difference, and we're helping our patients. So, yes, I think there is racism. I don't think that it's something that I want to put a huge magnifying glass over or, put myself out to be a victim. I'm absolutely not a victim at all. I'm really, really lucky, really blessed and privileged to be able to work for the NHS. But, I can't deny that it exists.
Yeah. So how can we move forward in terms of, do we just highlight it and then carry on with working, or what would you like to see? What kind of changes would you like to see, Suhail?
I mean, I think I teach in 3 medical schools, and I am seeing that this is coming into the curriculum. So we talked about autism, Asperger's. So they're making provisions for people with those type of conditions to make the learning easier for them, to accommodate them. I've had a medical student in a wheelchair, which was something I never saw. When I was at medical school, I never saw one single student in a wheelchair throughout the years that I was there.
I saw one.
Yeah, so there are steps to try and improve these things, to improve access to those who traditionally perhaps wouldn't have entered medicine, whether it's for a physical disability, an intellectual problem, or because they feel that they're from Lewisham and they're a black kid and they're never going to get anywhere. So I think we are making steps to combat that at that level, but still at the higher up level, there's still a lot of inherent institutional bias against those who are different.
Actually, would you mind if I disagree slightly on that? In that, looking at the ward rosters on all the wards that I go see patients on, there's the roster which has all the clinicians there, all the nurses, all the workers of that ward with their names. There are very few actually on these rosters in hospitals that I've worked at that are actually of white Caucasian origin on these photos. And this is not a bad thing, it's not a criticism. This is I'm just simply highlighting that actually a lot of doctors now, a lot of nurses are not from UK ethnicity. And so this bias, if it does exist, that is in my eyes coming down. And the powers that be, as this cohort, this generation, which are these photos, are moving up the ranks. They are making up the majority now, rather than the stereotypes that we've talked about before. So just from personal experience, I've noticed that actually in many places I've worked, I'm the minority as a Caucasian male. And so, I think things are changing, in a good way.
Another thing to point out is, thanks to things like Twitter and social media, we are seeing a lot of people coming out and talking of their experiences. There was this well-known A&E consultant who went on Twitter recently, and another GP actually up in Glasgow, who I won't name, but said that they had patients come up to them and say, "I don't want to see you, I want to see a white doctor." And there's this outrage that follows, like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe you said that. How can you say that?" I mean, let's not pretend this is a new problem. This has been happening for decades. It really has been happening for decades. And, it's been, whether it's swept under the carpet or, a blind eye turned to it, it's actually been happening for so much longer than we realise. I do remember when I started my partnership, and we were sitting in one of our first meetings, and the practice manager brought this to our attention, that he saw a doctor and said, "I don't want to see that doctor again, I want to see a white doctor." And what was interesting was the partners, who were all white, immediately said, throwing them off the list. Whereas me and the Indian doctor who worked there kind of looked at each other and we just started laughing, saying, "Fine, don't see us, we don't care, whatever. I'd much rather see a patient who wants to see me and is going to take on board what I have to say. And if people don't want to see me on the basis of my skin colour, then I'm certainly not the doctor for them."
But then there are Muslim patients who want to see a Muslim or an Asian doctor, and yet we sort of don't treat that as as a racist event.
Well, I mean, if we want to get pedantic, it's not really racism, but yeah, I understand what you mean, and that is equally unacceptable.
Yeah, but then we accept that more than.
I don't think we should.
We don't.
I don't think we should. I haven't seen it. I haven't come across that personally, though. Have you?
I see it all the time.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
From my perspective, from training and everything, I've actually noticed racism amongst within the Caucasian community. So as in, I've worked in all corners of the UK over the last 10 years, and I've definitely noticed it, and it's quite open, be it from where you work. I've worked in Northern Ireland as well. That was lovely place, but it was definitely felt elements of it because of history, because of culture, and even outside of the hospital. And so it does exist not just between cultures, but actually between within Caucasian society as well.
I think what's most sad about this is the lack of support for the doctors that are adversely affected by it. There was a documentary on, I think it was Channel 4, of this senior NHS surgeon. Well, I say senior, he's not that much older than me. And he was telling a story about how he was treating a patient, and then immediately, just before signing the consent form, the patient said to him, "By the way, I want you to make sure my surgeon is a white person." And this consultant was like, well, gosh, he didn't know what to say. He said, all he said was, "I'll see what I can do." And he went on to this interview, and he said, the reason I didn't know what else to say is because I don't know how I will be protected by the system, by the hospitals, by the trust, by the MDU in these situations if I say something. Because, clearly it's an unacceptable thing to say. Ultimately, if I need an operation that's life-saving, I do not care of the skin colour of the surgeon, so long as they're competent and they're able to do the job, hack away, whatever you've got to do. I think the lack of support in these situations is something that I'm most concerned about. Those people who are affected by it.
I think the dialogue is really important, to have this dialogue first of all, so these issues are highlighted and these issues are discussed, and then from that, then they can raise issues with the powers be, and then they can have protocols put in place, and I think that's really important. And that's why we're having this. It's a very uncomfortable conversation to have, and we're fairly comfortable between each other, and we're all kind of treading, difficult waters.
We are,
but we need to have these conversations.
It's because it's something that we don't want to admit exists, or it's something we don't want to talk about in case we say the wrong thing.
And that's the point I wanna put across. There's no point in saying it's just them and it's not us. It's everywhere. Racism is everywhere. And okay, we are in the UK, but if you go to Iraq, there's racism there. They don't want to be treated by X, Y, and Z, whether it's religion or race or colour or scarf or whatever. So it's an issue that's ubiquitous with human beings. It's not just sort of.
So how are we going to solve it?
By coming together and talking about it. Seeing what the issues are. Why don't you want to be treated by a white doctor or a black doctor or an Asian doctor? So these things need to be discussed, and you need to find ways of solving this service. We've got a service crisis at the end of the day. We don't have enough doctors. Full stop.
That's true.
So we do need to find ways of accommodating all kinds of belief systems, because that's what it is at the end of the day. It's different belief systems that are not compatible with each other. And we do have to sit down and discuss it all.
Yeah,
I don't know. That's all.
I think definitely going back to what Shan said, the lack of support for doctors who do.
Isn't that just a perception though, rather than the reality?
It could be, but
so if we go to the MDU, and say, look, we've got this problem. Okay, what is the support system that I have, rather than having that perception that I'm not supported?
Let's phone up the NDU now and see what they say.
Well, exactly. So that's something that's worth discussing and making it very explicit. And then from that, we will have experts in race relations or inter-race communication skills to sit down and do workshops that the MDU gets involved in, doctor leadership gets involved in, political leadership gets involved in, and it becomes a much more open dialogue. And then they can sit down and say, okay, we've got these situations in place, and then we've got these procedures in place. And then they can sort of bat out some hard and fast rules.
Yeah, I think it's not going to be solved by workshops and seminars, though. They may be, they may be a way into raising awareness. But I mean, let's look at football. I don't follow football.
No. Let's leave football.
Okay,
how are you going to solve it, Suhail?
So no, just saying they.
So you're saying that this whole system is institutionalized racism, and how are you going to solve that?
So it's when there is actual punitive measures for the doctor who voices such opinions or commits, gives preferential treatment or promotion to a particular doctor because of their race or origin. So, once and until and unless there is punitive action, then we can't say that the doctor committing that act will have any reason to not commit it. If they know that I'm going to be penalised or I'm going to be investigated by the GMC or I'm going to have some sanction placed upon me for exhibiting these racist behaviours, then, of course, there will be some curtailing of them even thinking about doing that.
But then they're just internalising the racism. It still exists.
The other problem is going to be proving it. And what I mean by that is I'm not talking about the overtly racist comments or things like that. I'm talking about, say, if someone gets promoted or someone gets reported, rather, and they're of an ethnic minority, it's okay, but did they need to be reported? And that's where there's going to be a grey area. Say, for example, I've reported people who I've worked with because of dangerous grounds, and it was very well justified. They were of ethnic minority. I didn't report them because of the minority. I reported them because of the unsafe practice. And if it goes to, okay, why was this person chosen to be promoted over the other person? I said, well, because clinically they're better. That would be the comeback, as it were. It's the easy comeback. And so it's proving that it's that. And in some cases it is, but it's whether or not this is for every case or whether or not it is, as you say. So it's going to be, it is a grey area, and it's going to be very difficult, I think, to try and find a balance, or try and find a way of going forward with it. Personally, I'll leave that to people more clever than me. So, but
there aren't many of those, though, Paul. I think, coming back to what you said about punitive measures, I'm just not sure how far they would really go. I mean, what do we mean by punitive? Well, I would much rather look at it in a way that would be similar to, say, if I had a house party and one of my guests was acting or behaving in an extremely racist manner, I'd throw him out in the street. And we kind of look at it in a similar objective. If we've got one of our staff, one of our colleagues, that we're entrusting in the health and well-being of our patients, and they're acting in this manner, I don't believe punitive measures will do anything. Just off you go. You don't belong here. This is totally unacceptable. This kind of language has no place in modern society. And coming back to your point earlier, I think things are an awful lot better now than they were in the 70s and 80s and 90s. It's just that nowadays we are seeing information disseminate so much more rapidly. We're seeing videos of real life experiences that people are subjected to go viral instantly. And speaking of videos, I don't know if you know this, but there's something in the BMA that I heard about, that there is absolutely nothing to stop a patient from having a consultation with you and videoing the whole thing. You can't do anything to stop them.
Really?
So they can,
without your knowledge as well.
Without our knowledge as well.
Yeah, it's outrageous.
But yet, if it was the other way around,
Oh God,
that would be an interesting.
and this comes back to what I chatted about with you, Haidar, on your last on our last interview, is that shift of power has moved so strongly towards the patient and so far away from the doctors, that we are actually tiptoeing around so many important issues that really need to be addressed, such as a patient turning around and saying to me, I don't want you operating on me because you're brown. And I've got no problem with that. That's fine. I won't operate on you then, because that's the way I've been sort of brought up and raised. But I can completely imagine and 100% support a doctor who would be upset or distressed by such a comment.
Yeah. I didn't know they could video you. That's just stayed in my mind now, actually. Just to
enjoy your next clinic.
Yeah, thankfully I can make him sleep. But still,
we love to be on video, don't we? I mean, even
well,
if
you
it
do,
is,
of course. I've seen your Facebook.
Even if it's a consultation. I mean, what's wrong with videoing you?
But it's without your consent. And say if something...
But you're there as a doctor. You're not there as Suhail, the human being, who doesn't give consent. You're there as the general practitioner seeing your patient. So you're professional and you're courteous and you're the GP.
But isn't it about limits of privacy and
it's your patient.
But it's similar to the argument of a speed camera. If why show them, because you're always abiding by the speed law. So therefore there shouldn't be an issue. You're never going above 30. You're never going above 70. In reality, there's going to be times where you're doing 71, 72, or
what? You do 70
I know. It's I'm sure.
I do 70 to 30.
Sure.
I do 70 to 30 miles an hour.
But you know what I mean. We're of course
find me if you can.
Of course, you're going to be professional and courteous all the time, as you were with everyone. But it's that one moment where you may slip up, and you may say something that.
Well, I mean, if they got one of those sort of spy cameras that they could have, put in their pockets, then it's a different ballgame.
Are we allowed to slip up? How well are these slip-ups tolerated?
That's
not very nowadays.
That's the thing. There's a really interesting podcast by TED Talk, by Dr. Brian Goldman, who's a Canadian emergency doctor, and he says doctors make mistakes, and he talks about baseball and a batting average of 0.3, which is 3 in 10 home runs. And he said, we as doctors, as physicians, are expected to have a 10 out of 10 home run success, which is absolutely impossible. So I think we beat ourselves up about that. We beat our colleagues up about that. Oh, well, you messed up that operation, or you had a complication, or a patient had a side effect, or you didn't check drug-drug interactions. It's impossible, absolutely impossible, to be on top of everything all the time, 100% of the time.
Yeah.
But then there's mistakes and then there's mistakes.
Well, look, let's look at mistakes. We're human. Humans make mistakes. Yeah. So, we're always going to be human, and that humanity and the human connection we have with our patients is absolutely critical. But it's almost like, well, you can't be too human. Because if you're too human, then you'll be making more mistakes than average, and we don't want that. So, it's a really, really fine balance to find out where we should actually be, and it seems to be moving more away from being human and more towards being algorithmic and protocol-driven, which, as you know, how much I love that stuff.
Yeah.
Hey, we're not far from Babylon Health here, are we?
No, they're just down the road from here.
Have you been down there before?
I haven't been to the offices, no.
Oh, it's lovely. Really nice bunch of people. They're going to replace us all. Well, not you.
They might.
We're all replaceable, as they say.
They absolutely might. But it is interesting that, the number of how careful we have to be, and we've chatted about this before, Hayden.
I'm being less careful. I don't know how that's working.
I don't know.
I don't know.
You tell us.
I'm being less careful.
I saw a patient with a white sticker. Was that yours?
No. Don't do them anymore.
But we don't take I feel we don't take the same risks, and I use that term for want of a better one, but we don't have the same ingenuity almost as we used to, and
our risk tolerance is reduced without a doubt.
And all these things, all these breakthroughs, and like the guy that made the first laryngeal mask airway, just moulding bits of rubber in his room, and then on night shifts sticking them down patients until eventually found a solution that fit, and then the rest was history. Revolutionised the way.
How many people aspirated before?
We don't know. But if it wasn't for you do that now, you'd be struck off in no time.
Yeah.
But back then it was like, let's see how this goes. And I think,
particularly if you're Asian, you'd be instantly struck off.
Creative bunch there.
That's a good circle there in discussion. But it's a shame, because you think things like that, which make wonderful stories, but also make for wonderful revolutions.
But I think you've got to be, talking about taping and so on, I think if I had a patient comes in taping me, I'll be even better. So I'd use that.
Even better than you are?
Of course, yeah.
It's not possible.
Wow. You'll be on your A+ game.
We'd be submitting it for your appraisal, wouldn't you?
Well, I did get actually, my responsible officer did send me a very interesting picture of himself.
Oh, did you? Because you were having some difficulties getting hold of him.
Yeah. So, I kind of use that to my advantage. And I think more doctors should do that.
What happened?
Well, it's still okay.
Still practicing.
Still registered. The box is still ticked.
Actually, that's the thing I think we need to be aware of. Perhaps less our generation, because I'm not on Facebook, I'm not on Instagram, but I think the students of now who are at medical school and the junior doctors are posting every day, all day, in themselves in compromising positions. I heard of something called bus stopping or something. I don't know. That may not be the right word.
There's nothing wrong with that, sir.
Lying on a bus shelter, drunk, passed out, comatose.
Doctors?
Yeah, medical students.
Oh, medical students.
And then this is on Facebook forever.
Pretty regular behaviour.
Do you know what I mean?
But then it could be used against them, or imagine you just finished your house of what are they called now?
F1.
F1s. Yeah, you finished your FY1 shift. It's been really busy. Say, had a crap shift today. Consultant was.
Here's my crap.
Consultant was an arse, and you just post that.
Yeah, but I know it's not professional, but I think as I know we're not allowed to be human anymore. But I think it's still okay to show your humanism, and if you can justify yourself in front of the board.
I think being human is ultimately what's going to save medicine, in my opinion.
Well, that's the only thing about medicine.
Because if we think about it, as we're moving more and more protocol-driven, what are these computers never going to be able to do? They're never going to be able to replicate human connection from one person to turn to another and say, you're going to be all right, Paul.
Yeah.
And then patients will go to the WACs at the end of the day, quacks, because they're the ones who are creating that human, and us as a profession, we're going to be... old school, mate. No one's going to come and see a doctor anymore.
Other than old.
Well, we are old school. We can't deny it. Yeah, we qualified in the 90s. We've got a young whippersnapper here next to us, educating us on how things are nowadays.
I feel I have a older mind.
But you are. I have to say, you are wise beyond your words, Paul. Beyond your years, Paul.
Thank you. But no, it's true. The protocol thing. I noticed it. Even at med school, the amount of time we spent on communication skills, which granted is important, very important, the way you talk to people and how you address breaking bad news, and that's fine. But it was in detrimental terms, we didn't spend as much time on things like the important things. For me, at least, things like anatomy or the physiology.
I 100% agree.
And so it's almost like you are being taught to look like you know what you're doing without actually knowing what you're doing.
How much time do we spend studying sarcoidosis, lupus? SLE was just such a massive... How many cases of SLE have you seen in your life?
Well, every week you watch House, it's always SLE, isn't it? But yeah, it's true.
But that's because medical education so far is changing now, is secondary care driven. They spend most of their time in the wards seeing weird and wonderful esoteric conditions that they will never, ever see. Even as a consultant, if they go into that specialty, it will be the hen's teeth case that they see. And in general practice, where I am based and you're based, we see the common day-to-day stuff. The person with the cough probably has a chest infection or viral infection. unlikely sarcoidosis.
But that would be boring to learn.
Of course,
in medical school, you know. I mean, we'd learn that in a week.
I made a sort of
GPs, what do they know? Do it in a week.
Come on, man, you know, all these little minutiae. I mean, I remember studying for my, you know, ophthalmic exams. It was just minutiae. And then I finished my exams, I went to clinic, and it was just the same old boring stuff.
We're not looking for more advanced or rare diagnosis.
What's the point of this? It's like, I fell asleep. Back to sleep again.
They're working on the premise that if you've read the minutiae,
if you knew the mic, you can be a pedantic sod, and I was a pedantic sod actually. Yeah, I know that is. Off you go, mate.
But I think what's important is narrative. Narrative-based medicine is the way forward. And that encompasses humanity. That encompasses
social media. You know, talking about your crap and talking about how you had a, you know, it's great.
You've got
narrative.
to remember that people, when they've had a crap day at work and they want to blow off steam and they haven't got anyone to call, then they'll just do it on social media and they feel better as a result. So, you know, if their consultant has acted like an arse, which they probably have, let's be honest, why not just post it?
Yeah, I think it's a good thing.
You might get into trouble.
But if you say defamatory or
yeah, I mean, you would get into trouble, but at least it's sort of out there, and I think that's a good thing.
You know, slander, defamation, these sorts of things, and then dodgy territory
legal stuff out there that you can get stuck into.
You've got to be brave to do it. Let's be honest. You know, this isn't the sort of behaviour for everyone. It's not
like
the sort of behaviour
video,
I condone. Just to be clear, but you know, ultimately, if I think that someone is being totally out of order and unreasonable, and I've got something to say about it, I do, and I will, as you probably saw from my Twitter feed recently.
What happened? What did you do?
It's just, you know, all this nonsense with PCNs and they're debating this contract. Look, what is there to even debate? You know, just no. Let's just say no. Why are we involving LMCs to even talk about it? You know, I can't remember the last time my LMC did anything for us. And they got a bit sarcastic with my response, so I called them out on a number of issues.
And did that move you forward, as in get what you want, or not really?
No, but I felt better.
Oh, okay.
I felt better saying, look, you know what? Here's a few things that are happening on your watch right now. Suicide rates are up to 4 times the national average amongst doctors in the UK. What are you doing about it? Mental health problems, 25% prevalence within the health service. What are you doing about it? So many other things to talk about. You know, I think it was 25% of doctors resort to alcohol, drugs, or self-prescriptions just to get through their daily shifts. What are you doing about it?
And did this get you in trouble?
No, it didn't. Not yet. I was a bit disappointed, I have to say.
Well, you weren't doing it to get into trouble, but you had stuff to say.
Evoke a response.
And, you know, and who else are you going to speak to as well? It's not as if...
Well,
the official lines are going to listen to it.
Particularly when a representative body, who I've paid a little fortune to over the years, is actually turning around and being sarcastic to me and trying to brush off these very, very serious problems that our profession is currently facing. Not least to mention the problems we have with recruitment and retention. You know, we've lost 20% of our workforce.
They're doing nothing about it.
They're doing nothing.
Yeah. So, you know, I mean, you know, if your consultant does something RC, just put it out there on social media.
Yeah.
And he or she may change.
Yeah, I had a good little spat with Dr. Maureen Baker, the RCGP former chair. Oh dear, just thought, why are you even, you know, starting an argument with me? Do you not know how this is going to end? And you know, just
what was the argument about?
Put her in her place. It was actually your mate, Dr. Gandalf.
Yeah.
Who?
Gandhi.
Who I don't know. I'm sure he's a lovely
Gandhi
guy.
Hussain.
But
EGP Learning.
Yes, that's the one. Yes, you're doing a big shout out for his website if you want to.
EGP Learning. Nice work, Dr. Gandhi. Keep it up.
I haven't met him. I'm sure he's a lovely bloke. We live in the same town.
Our podcast episode's coming out in a few weeks.
He's going to leave a link below for it as well.
Well, yeah, if he releases it after this.
So then, Maureen Sullivan, am I getting her name right? Is it
Maureen Baker?
Maureen Baker, that's the one, forgive me. Maureen Sullivan, I'm sure, is a very pleasant person. Jumped in on it and started to take over and go on about, you know, the RCGP's agenda for, you know, overwhelming support for GPs. And I don't see any evidence of that whatsoever. But what I can give you is some facts. Here you go, one at a time, Maureen. Bang. And you have no response, and it's interesting that because there is no response,
Yeah, facts are good at the end of the day.
How do you
Facts,
respond
yeah.
to the fact that suicide rates amongst doctors are up to 4 times the national average? Where's the response?
I think one thing I've noticed with these figures that you get thrown out, so you get told why something's a problem. So, but you'll never get a solution told to you. They'll say, this is happening. So many people are dying. So many people are committing suicide, and this is the stress rate now amongst doctors. We've conducted a survey, so it looks like you've done something.
Yeah,
it's
addressed it.
But that's where it ends. You don't get the now. This is what we're going to do to try and resolve this. Or you'll get a discussion group meeting which says, we need to do this, but actually nothing transpires of it, or the solutions are so weak that they're not even worth mentioning.
So what does it take to start the process of solution of reducing mental health problems and suicide in doctors? Apart from talking about which, we are...
So I think, I can't remember the name, I think it's called Doctors for Doctors. Is the organisation. I went to appraiser training recently. So we have to, as an appraiser, we have to go annual training. And there was the doctor from there who basically runs this organisation. And she was saying these very same things. It was talking about doctors, but particularly GPs. So GPs, divorce rate, suicide rate, alcoholism, depression, mental health problems, by the bucket load. Loads and loads of doctors. And as you were saying, they medicate just to go back to work and do a clinic that is ram full of patients. 15, 18 patients in the morning, 18 patients in the afternoon, 3 home visits in the lunchtime, reams of paperwork.
That'll kill you.
Yeah. So that's one thing we need to address, the unsustainable model of general practice and healthcare provision. But also we need to have the institutions. RCGP, I totally agree, is a useless body. They have no way to support the people who pay to keep them going. There is nothing there for doctors to turn to and say, listen, I'm really struggling. You know what? I just broke up with my wife. I've been drinking like a fish. Can you help me, please? Oh, well, no, let's give you a suspension for not being a fit and proper doctor, for drinking on the job. I mean, how humane is that?
Yeah.
I don't think I've got anything to add to my already expressed opinions on the RCGP.
I have no experience with them, but from
they're lovely.
I'm sure they're lovely. I'm sure. Haidar?
Yeah, I mean, there's not enough money, time, support, personnel, people in this area, and it's only just starting now. Really, I mean, only in the last sort of year or 6 months that people are actually trying to find ways of helping struggling doctors. It's going to get worse. Because people are going to come out needing help.
There was one thing which, from doing the burnout episodes and meeting people who have suffered from it or who are helping to eradicate the problem through various foundations and things, it seems to be there's still a very big stigma regarding actually wanting to come forward and saying, I've got this problem, because it's generally seen that it's not acceptable for, as we were saying, a doctor to be human and to have these problems, and you're seen as weak, and so people aren't going to their supervisors, not going to their consultants, they're not going to, whatever body they're registered with, and saying that there's an issue, and it's trying to get rid of this stigma, saying it's actually okay to come forward and say, I need time off, I need help with this. So it is all, as well as there is a problem at the higher end in terms of the trainers, as it were. There's also a problem at the lower end of the people actually suffering with it, actually wanting to make it known to their hospitals.
See, when I finished VTS in 2006, my dream was to become a partner, and I did. I joined a partnership. Because of relationships with the partners, I couldn't sustain it. But now it is the last thing I would ever want to get into. And therein lies the problem, recruitment and retention. People are thinking of retiring age 50, 55, 10 years before they would normally retire. People are thinking of not joining general practice. I can speak for general practice because that's what I'm familiar with. People are definitely not wanting to do partnership or long-term commitment. So you have this fractured, disjointed workforce that doesn't know their colleagues and most importantly, doesn't know the patient. I come in, I do a locum, and I think, oh, yeah, I saw the consultant last week. I have to wade through the computer notes. Oh, you've been referred for your knee. Okay, it takes twice as long to do consultation, and then we have the pressure of there's 10 more patients waiting outside. Hurry up, doctor. Why are you an hour late?
Who's saying hurry up to you?
Well, often...
Do you let people speak to you like
I don't, but I'm just saying that I take as long as I want to consult.
Good.
And if a patient needs a half an hour, they need a half an hour. If it's a 2-minute pill check or whatever, then it's a 2-minute pill check. Just do the blood pressure, that's done. So I take as long as I need and as long as I feel is appropriate for that patient. But there is an inherent pressure, even in the back of my mind, that I've got this massive clinic that's still there. And you walk into the waiting room and think, oh, and you see the third patient after the one, you've got 2 more in front of them, and they're looking at you thinking, is it me next? So this pressure you put on yourself, and then you were likely to make mistakes, or you could make mistakes, you could rush, you could not listen properly, and then only one problem per consultation. How is that a way to deal with a patient? Sorry, you can only discuss your knee, you can't discuss the ankle, which might be connected to the knee. You can't discuss the headaches that you're having. Why not? Why not,
A big shout out to Amandip Sidhu, who's working in the Doctors in Distress organisation. So that's definitely someone to contact and speak to. And he's doing some amazing work in helping doctors in distress.
Well done, Amandip.
Thank you. And we've actually just done a small collaboration as well with the podcast. So he's an affiliate now with the podcast, his charity. And so, thank you. It's been lovely meeting you, and also the work that he's doing is actually phenomenal now. It's getting bigger and bigger, which is good.
So I mean, that's the kind of positive side of this increasing phenomenon.
And I think we need more of that.
Yeah, we need to champion that.
To keep going.
There are people out there.
It would be good to get central organisations championing things like this.
Well, it's essential. Full stop. It's essential. I mean, I work in the private healthcare sector, and we need to take care of our doctors, because if we don't have doctors, we have no clinics, and if we have no clinics, we have no income coming in. And I think they need to seriously think about that. I don't understand NHS England. I don't understand NHS full stop. I mean, why are they just letting it bleed, literally? I mean, do you think this is the start of the end of the NHS?
This has been going on for 30 years. This was started under Thatcher and Ken Clarke, the cuddly hush puppy wearing Tory.
There's nothing wrong with hush puppies.
There's nothing wrong with hush puppies.
Look at these dirty trainers you got.
Oh, please.
Outrageous.
But
I'm not wearing hush puppies today, but I used to wear fucking hush puppies all the bloody time.
But no, it's just my, the impression that...
Pulling your leg, mate.
Sorry, go on.
That Ken Clarke is a cuddly Tory, very, very far from it. He's happy
I'm a Tory as well, mate.
Happy to sell cigarettes
I'm cuddly as well.
To pregnant women in Vietnam on the board of British American Tobacco. But let's not get sidetracked. So the sell-off of the NHS started...
Soundbite, wonderful, a great soundbite.
The sell-off started 30 years ago and was accelerated under Tony Blair and with PFI. The creation of an internal market, trust, purchaser-provider split. This is all just a subtle, well, not so subtle nowadays, but a subtle, insidious move to fracture and break the NHS. And it's been going on for 30 years.
But populations have changed, expectations have changed, cultures have changed.
Hairstyles
age.
have changed.
My hairstyle hasn't changed. I'm sure yours has changed.
Did you get that from Kailash Chand's article that he wrote? The end game was always to dismantle general practice.
I mean, I don't think I've read that article, but it's just through having read up on the issue and following the developments that have been happening. Tendering out of services to private healthcare providers, United Health, Kaiser Permanente, these massive US
Well, if they do a better job.
But what is their end goal? What is their end aim? Profit. Profit over patient
the NHS
is never...
isn't working.
But that's the myth that is dispelled. You sell this myth.
I think, even prior to this, GPs needed to make a profit just to sustain. I think ultimately a lot of the things that have been passed on to the private sector, and I don't agree with a lot of it, but it's happened because general practices coming together or creating organisations to serve such needs have not been able to do it because they are so overwhelmed with all of the work that they have to do day to day. We saw it in my area quite a lot, that set up triage services for orthopedics, which was actually very effective. And ultimately, the contract expired, went out to tender, and an organisation bid for it, and they won it because they could do a better job. Now, I don't know the ins and outs of the bidding process or who said what to whom or anything like that, but they ended up doing a better job. And yes, they've got a responsibility to their shareholders to make money. That's how business is done. But in terms of the actual process of privatization, it's not like they've enforced it. A lot of the time they've had no choice because they can't get homegrown organizations to come together and do it in a non-corporate way.
Also, GPs are leaving the NHS and going to where the work is. It's not as if everyone's being forced out of it. It's people are walking to where they want to walk to.
But that's connected with workforce issues and workload and things that we've already talked about before, why GPs are leaving.
But is this a natural progression, evolution of healthcare, or is it... I'm not saying that's what you're saying, but this is kind of planned, politically planned to go that way.
Yeah, so where's Alan Milburn now?
Don't know, where is he?
On the Bridgewater Capital, who own Care UK. Isn't that a coincidence? This massive revolving door...
Natural corporate migration of...
I think,
do you know what I mean?
We'd be naive to think that his work initially was done solely for the good of the people. And
it was never done for the good of the people.
Yeah, obviously, that's the point I'm making. And I mean, I take your word for it if that's what he's doing now. I don't know. I'm not really up to speed on what he's up to. But I think what we've got to look at, the bigger question here is, why have we needed to involve all of this privatisation? Why isn't the sort of the day-to-day work of general practice enough to meet it all within the primary care setting where 90% of all NHS consultations happen? Now, there are a lot of potential answers to that. I think one of the biggest ones is that there have been organisations and institutions that are actively going out of their way to make the job harder and more challenging and more frustrating and more irritating, big box-ticking exercises and punitive measures for those who steer away from pathways, policies, protocols, procedures. And it just gets really frustrating. So a lot of GPs will say, you know what, forget about it. I don't want to do it. I'm just going to go part-time, do a couple of days a week, and the rest of the time I'm just going to spend with loved ones, watch my children grow, do something else, buy a few properties, I don't know, whatever it is a lot of GPs do. They're certainly not playing golf quite as much as they used to back in the 90s. So, yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. It's a complete mess, and there are organisations that are profiting out of it, but they do have responsibilities both to their shareholders and also to the NHS. The strict criteria that they have to meet to keep those contracts going, and if they don't, then that contract is cancelled.
Do you think the criteria will get more lenient as the years go on?
I find it strange that there seem to be, but it's becoming less lenient against doctors, isn't it? It's becoming more stringent, and the thumb screws are attached and tight. I'm just glad that I'm semi-retired now, and I can see the system for what it is, and I just go and do my bit and go home. I don't want to get heavily involved physically or emotionally into it. I've given so much to the NHS over the last 20 years, and look where it got me. Got a nice bed on a cardiac ward. So I think we just have to sort of step back, do what we can do reasonably that's not going to affect us emotionally, it's not going to burn us out, and just hope and pray for the best.
I think that detachment is
critical.
It's quite important.
Absolutely.
To actually detach yourself from this NHS entity, and it's quite empowering actually.
You notice it a lot in the hospitals now. Even the small things, I think, make a very, very big difference in terms of the privatisation of it. So, for example, just the bins being emptied are done by private companies. The sharps bins being taken away and all that.
Yeah.
And before, you used to have people with NHS branded clothing. They were a member of the NHS, and it felt like one big institution that was working together towards one goal. Now you have scrubs made by a company that get washed by another company. You have, like I say, the waste management side of things that gets brought in by another company. The food is brought in by a different catering company. And these are all small things that might not be related directly to actual healthcare itself, the actual medicine side of things. But they all contribute in a small way to adding more cost and more inefficiencies.
Yeah,
and
of course.
That's my issue, the inefficiencies that result.
Yeah.
But I mean, look at Carillion just a year ago. Massive cleaning contract. They just went bust and said, sorry, screw your pension, screw your this.
Did they say sorry?
Well,
I missed that.
sarcastically, yes. Sorry, we can't help you. Your pension is lost,
We spent it.
Exactly. So, and PFI, this grand scheme where private companies will build your spanking Bart's healthcare. The cost of that was 1.2 billion, but they'll be spending 7.1 by the time, and they're still financing 100 million a year in interest payments alone. 100 million in the in Tower Hamlets in East London. Imagine what that could do.
Well, I mean, going back a little bit, let's go back to when these agreements were made. I mean, I'm not sure when that was done. Our local trust, they did a PFI arrangement in the early noughties, and they agreed an interest rate of 11.1%. Now, I know interest rates were a lot higher than they were, but they were not 11.1%. And anyone who agreed to that really ought to be slapped down and sacked and never heard from again. It's just outrageous, those kind of decisions, because similarly, they're paying about 30 million a month in interest alone. And so they've got to generate 30 million a month before they can even pay their staff.
Exactly, yeah.
Wow, that's a tough job to be. So I'm just glad I'm detached from that, and certainly glad that I was not part of that decision.
Is it fair to say that ultimately all of these problems could be solved with more funding, technically? Given that seems to be sort of the driving force of it, everything seems to stem back from this. And if there was enough funding, then things wouldn't need to go out to bidding wars. And
Well, part of me wonders if they were actually set up to fail like this.
Yeah,
and then
sure.
they will fail, and then someone will buy them for like 10 cents on the dollar, and then make a go of it.
Yeah. It does feel that in many ways, actually. Even looked at patients' scans, and they've got things like Virgin Healthcare on the top of them already, and that was even a while ago. And it's just you're thinking, before that used to have the NHS logo on the top of that. And
what do patients say, or do they comment
thing
about
is,
these things?
I think patients tend to just, as long as something will get done, if they need a scan that gets done, they're happy. They don't care as long as they're treated as an NHS patient, and that's what they were expecting. So the cost is covered with their national insurance, which they've been paying, and
are we just too nostalgic about this?
No, some patients do take exception to it, and they get quite.
No, as in us as doctors, that we're getting a bit too carried away with this nostalgia. Oh, it's the NHS, and it must be together. It must be this, and
Well, let's go back to the 80s and 90s. The NHS was not great then either. We had doctors collapsing and dying at work. A lot of junior doctors nowadays complain about working 48 hours a week. When I started, I was doing 48 hours on a weekend on call sometimes. It was normal. We had no paid breaks.
and if you died, well, you'll get up in in a couple of hours' time. Otherwise, you're in trouble. You can't die on the job. But
If he doesn't get up,
it.
put the blanket over his head.
I would definitely say that going, listening to stories about how the NHS was or how doctor life was, it was definitely, the hours were atrocious. From
The racism was definitely there. Back in those days.
When I was applying to medical school, one of my friends did turn to me when I was 17, 18. He said, medical doctors, they've got the highest rate of divorce, alcoholism and suicide. I said, I didn't know that. It didn't stop me from applying. Not much has changed. Let's not, as I said to you earlier, Suhail, let's not pretend any of these problems are new.
Yeah.
These have been going on for a long time.
We've become sensitive. We've become wusses.
I feel I wouldn't be doing the part if I didn't try and defend my generation of things in terms of
Mate, you're part of us, mate. What are you talking about?
Things were definitely hours and things were a lot harder back then. But one thing I will say is it sounds like it was a lot more fun.
We had a ton of fun.
Yeah,
no doubt about it.
And I think nowadays the hours might be different, but I think the stresses are a lot different.
No, I mean, it's just so not complicated. I mean, I remember doing, ophthalmology. I think there was only about 10 or 12 different conditions you can treat. It just wasn't so complicated.
Yeah.
Now it's just so complicated. The whole mechanism of healthcare.
Yeah.
It's so complicated now.
Yeah. I mean, if you were a registrar, you could just say to your junior back then, just crack on,
Yeah, piss off.
Don't wait.
Get on with it. And now it's like you gotta be very politically correct.
Now consultants are in all the time. They're registrars are always there on the floor. It's changed, and the time that you're in the hospital is very different. The stress of the paperwork side of things, the logistics of it, trying to order scans and things like that, it's changed. It wasn't before you could walk down the corridor and find your radiographer and be like, do you mind just popping to the wall doing a quick echo? Now
they were cool about it.
Yeah, they're like, yeah, no problem. Yeah, whereas now,
and they knew your name and you knew their name. You'd have a laugh.
Try doing that.
But
now,
how can you solve this, Paul? I know it's a big question. I mean, you mentioned funding. You think funding will?
I don't think funding will change that to some extent. I think that's just going back to what we were saying earlier. The protocol driven. It's like, heaven forbid if you do a scan without the request form being there. Just because it was word of mouth and it's just not going to happen.
Yeah, back in our day, we didn't have any request form. Just pick up the phone. Oh yeah, do that, and that's it.
Or trying to just send off bloods now is just they try to make it simple with the computer system and it prints out your stickers and your labels but the whole process, because that's assuming you can actually log in, that's assuming that there's actually internet working, and there's all these little variables that
apparently
actually
it took 41 minutes to log into
with
NHS.
all your usernames, password. It's ridiculous.
41 minutes for one trust.
Well, they're on dial-up internet.
I don't know.
No, it's just purely from the different number of systems.
Right.
So there's so you have a different system for X-ray that requires a username, password. Different one for looking at blood results. That's a different one. One to log into the actual computer itself. Another one if you've got to look at X-rays from a different.
No wonder you're
hospital.
podcasting now, Paul.
Yeah, it's true.
How many passwords on your podcast?
Just the one.
But it's definitely. Makes your life very, very hard. It makes it a lot less enjoyable. But when there's days where you don't have to deal with all of those things and you can just do the basic fundamental care that you can do in, say, an A&E resus bay, which is the one time I will say all of that seems to go out the window, all the admin stuff, all the bureaucracy. And it's sad because it's clearly in a very serious situation. You've got someone that is dying in front of you. But what is nice is just how when you are dealt with something like that, all of that just gets ignored and it's just put whatever you can up, do this, forget, all the...
I think maybe that's why I loved working in A&E for so long. I did A&E for 3 years and it was great because as a result of that, you knew everybody.
Yeah.
And everybody knew you. And there was only one criteria. If you give good referrals and you care about patients, then they're more likely to listen to you next time.
Yeah.
And so I knew everybody in the hospital, and they all knew me. It was just absolutely brilliant. Mess parties. Oh, let's get them a beer. And I don't drink now, just to be clear. But things would get done without a doubt.
It's common sense medicine.
Yeah.
It's one of the few places where you can actually practice common sense medicine in a good unit. One that isn't becoming more triage based, which unfortunately. I
think they started triage, didn't they?
Yeah, they did.
It's all their fault.
It's and sadly, again, that's the result of the work pressures. So patient comes in and you're saying, okay, they're surgical, they're medical, they're home, they're for for admission.
They're malingerers.
Yeah, and it's true, and it's a shame that sometimes they don't have the time to do everything there, fix up the patient, and then send them on their way, or send them to the ward. Solved, as it were, or on that right path, and that's where you get the stories of waiting for so long to get treated, and I think that's where things like that stem from as well. But That's not all the time, of course.
So would you say, because there's a comment I've heard from surgeons, that trainees are less well equipped or less capable because they're spending less time in the ward? They're not having that 24-hour take, or they're not being able to follow up their patients, or the consultant's always there to just sort out a difficult problem. Are trainees less capable now in actually doing the medical job?
I think if something's not part of a pathway, which goes back to sort of the med school teaching you loads of communication skills versus actual practical skills, or giving you the freedom to use your head, think a bit laterally, think outside the box, and just be like, okay, let's just get this done. Doesn't matter, it works. Crack on. So yeah, I do think, if you get a bog standard textbook example of, say, a heart attack, I guarantee they'll be treated well. But it's the variables that can throw people, and it just goes back to that protocol-driven side of things, and also the fear of doing something
wrong or different.
Is wrong. And so whereas before, or even one thing I will say, when I was, say, in Northern Ireland, where it was a lot more, it felt like a bit more old school, the training side of things in surgery. So someone came in with, big injury, you'd look and you're okay, stitch them up in A&E, come back next day, check it. And you can't do that now or here to some extent, because you'd be like, you did what? You can't send someone home with that. But that was the norm.
And I found that it's actually the younger doctors and the younger consultants who are like, you did one. Whereas the more senior doctors were, yeah, good on you.
Yeah, it's true. I got sort of told off when I was in F1. There was no other doctors on the ward. They're all in theatre, and beds needed to be freed up. So there I was as an F1. Patients were coming in, and I would just treat them before they did, and I sent them home. And so I was discharging patients, which I didn't know at the time, because I was quite brand new. I was brand new. I didn't know that this was wrong. And so when my registrar found out that I'd been sending patients home, he was absolutely horrified. And I told the consultant, who was quite senior, I said, so-and-so came in with this, and this. I've sent them home. He was,
see your GP.
He was very grateful, and he said, well done, you did a good job. And that was the difference between, like you say, someone that with the experience, and I did it out of ignorance, but it was the difference in reaction was extraordinary. So lesson learned anyway. But,
which is why the clinical experience of physicians in the Eastern countries. I remember when I went to Iraq, and I was there for 3 years. I learned so much there.
Yeah, of course.
Because I had to learn.
You see everything,
and then you see everything. You do everything, and you were there to treat as many people as possible, as safely as possible.
Yeah.
And you just got good at it because you had to get good at it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you wouldn't be alive. It's just like having this free-form conversation. It's okay. We're making a lot of mistakes here and so on, but we are getting results. We are getting used to it. We're innovating. We're going with the flow. I think there should be more of that flow thing rather than piecemeal and tick boxing. And that's unlikely to change.
I mean, my dad was a GP. He tells me the story of going to a patient with cardiac arrest, took out adrenaline, boom, straight into the myocardium.
Pulp Fiction.
I mean, that doesn't happen nowadays. Obviously, you call a blue light ambulance, but whenever that was in the 80s or whenever he went out on, and GPs used to do their own home visits, totally different story.
Then that's did the ambulance still come?
Yes,
send him back to work.
Of course, in the late 80s, 90s when GPs
but even that's quite fragmented. Instead of you dealing with it, it's like ambulance.
But some things need to be seen in the hospital.
Yeah.
Just leave him. Okay, fine. Well, you've just had a bit of adrenaline. You'll be fine now.
Yeah.
It's true. Cool.
We can't deal with everything then.
We can't.
But are we expected to?
But at least we should know about it. Kind of start it off, and then rather no, that's not my thing anymore.
Sorry, you mean GPs or doctors generally?
I think GP is almost like the buck sort of stops with the GP, and we have to say, well, we can't deal with everything.
Yeah.
The expectations are so high upon us.
Yeah.
And set by organisations that are increasingly non-clinical, like CQC and NHS England.
Yeah.
You know, like a while ago, we're not contractually obliged to provide emergency services, emergency care, as NHS GPs, and then CQC come in and say, actually, your GP must be your first port of call. What? On what basis? Wherever you can't argue with us, we're CQC. Right. Okay. So
can you legally argue with them, or I mean, do
they
they
flog you.
Do they have a
No,
kind
they don't
of
flog you. In my
legal-
experience, they don't. I found, generally speaking, that they didn't seem to listen very much to us. And my issue with them was that they came and did an assessment of our practice and published a report based on their assessment, which they sent to the press before they even sent to us. And they wrote down 8 shortcomings, of which 7 we'd already addressed before it had got to the press, and the 8th one was due to be addressed that weekend. So it painted our organisation in a really bad light, which ultimately was false at the time of publication. And what they don't think about here is, how is this actually going to affect our GP practice? A patient's going to start to leave. Our employees going to start to feel disheartened, like, we work so bloody hard and this is what we get. Forget it, I'm off. This is going to actually affect the organisation from a financial perspective. Because, you know, if patients start to leave, I mean, that patients are the lifeblood of a general practice. So, you know, who's actually thought this through? Why couldn't we actually sit down and have an intelligent conversation and say, okay, so we found these things, let's talk about them, and let's talk about your plan to address them, because nobody's perfect. You know, we're all human, all right? We're going to go in circles here. And we'll, you know, talk about how you're going to, instead it was just so aggressive and just unwilling to go outside their specific directive. And that's what I found really, really frustrating about engaging with them.
Because you deal with robots, basically. I think it goes back to the, well, they haven't done this. It doesn't matter, but they're taking care of it.
Let's be honest, no self-respecting doctor works for CQC. And yeah, I've said it. Yeah, who's going to argue? Anyone? No? Good. They don't. And, you know, ultimately, they have a clear agenda and just a really, seem to be a deeply unpleasant bunch of people.
What's their agenda?
I think it's very similar to the agenda that we spoke about earlier. It's all part of a bigger picture. Going back to Dr Kailash Chand's excellent piece that he wrote for Pulse last year.
Which is?
Have you not seen it?
Just in
follow
case
me on Twitter?
Just in case the people.
So we'll leave links below to all of this interesting stuff.
So dismantling of.
Oh, look, you know, we some people will call these conspiracy theories.
Yeah.
I'm just looking at things from the past.
You like facts, I know.
I like facts, and you know, if we extrapolate where we were, where we are, and then where we're going as a result, that's what I'm looking at. Unless there's massive intervention at some point to change the direction of where things are going, then yeah, it's all gonna fold.
Fall apart.
House of cards.
So
on that bright note,
we're going to wrap up this imperfect podcast, video, however you want to call it. Well,
just I don't want to leave on a negative note. So
no. I mean, I was going to say
the most important thing there I want to say is there's probably never been a more important time for anyone listening or anyone in this room to look after our own health in the best ways that we possibly can, take care of ourselves physically, mentally, emotionally, socially, and do what we can to avoid, prevent illness. With all the uncertainty and all the disillusioned clinical staff who are highly experienced and not being listened to and are leaving in droves, that's really, I think, is what's going to save healthcare right now, how we take care of ourselves.
Thank you for answering that question. What I was going to say is how we're going to wrap up this imperfect podcast episode video. If each one of us can give us a final wrap up, but Shan's already done his one.
Yeah, I think that's a nice sentiment.
I'm just going to leave here and look at your shoes.
So I love my shoes, actually.
Cool.
That's the best thing about today is wearing these shoes. Bastard.
Is it my bastard? Who's the bastard?
So I think the thing that we need to remember is all of us as doctors, as physicians, ultimately our main aim, our main goal is the well-being, health and wellness of our patients. I think that we all entered medicine for that reason. We didn't enter it to gain notoriety. We didn't enter it to gain loads and loads of financial benefit. Although we're paid well, let's not beat about the bush. But I think if we remember that as the underlying goal of why we entered this healthcare service, whether we work in the NHS, whether we work privately, whether we work part-time, full-time, I do all of these things. And sometimes I have conflict, internal conflict about why do I do some private medicine when I'm inherently against privatization of the NHS. But I think if we remember that we are here for the well-being of our patients and keep that at our centre and our core, then I don't think we can go wrong.
Cool. Shan's already done his piece.
I would say, yes, we all look after our patients and we do it well. And my final piece would be just to make sure that we don't forget to look after each other. And I think anyone listening, or the powers that be that are in a position to look after juniors, or in many cases seniors too,
old biddies like me.
They don't lose sight of that, and just to realise that, as we were saying, we are all human and we do suffer the same problems that our patients suffer from.
Yeah.
And so we mustn't forget that. Just to recognise that in ourselves and also our colleagues too, and seek help when needed.
And Shan, you wanted to add something?
I love that, Paul. That's fantastic. I think if the powers that be are listening, it's really about how we can all come together, look after ourselves, look after each other, and not just our fellow professionals, but our populations as well.
And I'd like to add, please let us enjoy ourselves.
Yeah.
At work and outside.
Yes.
Whether it means
bloody serious.
Yeah, exactly. And let us enjoy ourselves. And
Posting those Facebook.
just let us post it. Yeah, and let us swear and let us get our juices out and have some fun. Thank you so much, Paul.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much, Shan.
Pleasure.
Thank you, Suhail.
Thank you
for watching. If you've got this far, you're fucking crazy. See you guys. Have a good time.
Bye, everyone. So I hope you all enjoyed our chat, and please do check out Haidar and Shan's website and podcast, both of which contain some fantastic resources and self-help advice, and links can be found in the podcast description. That's it for this week. Please do leave a review if you're enjoying the show, and do follow me on Instagram at A Doctor's View for some behind-the-scenes posts, and do contact me with any topics that you'd like me to consider for the show. Please look after yourself, and I'll join you again soon. I'm Dr Livios. Goodbye.